Welcome. Today we're going to take a look at another ShadowDark Curse Scroll. This one is Curse Scroll number 2, Red Sands. Now the Curse Scrolls, they expand the options and the core rules. Each one covers a Hexcrawl area that's a different geography. There's usually some character classes that are thematically tied to the Hexcrawl, some gameplay elements, a bestiary, and a dungeon. This one, Red Sands, is all desert themed. I'm a big fan of it. There's a few classes and some gameplay elements, which I think every campaign can benefit from. So let's switch over to taking a look at the screen so you guys can see what I'm seeing, and let's dive in. All right, here's the cover for Curse Scroll 2. You got a guy on a camel with a scimitar. To me, it gives this Lawrence of Arabia vibes. When we look at the first character class, it is the Desert Rider, which is straight out of Lawrence of Arabia. On the inside cover, here's the Hexcrawl. There's about 20 different locations, some rumors, some guidance on wandering encounters. However, let's take a look at the character classes. Okay, the first one is the Desert Rider. The utility of this class is really going to come down to, is your campaign dungeon focused, wilderness focused, or a 50-50 blend? I think in the dungeon, this is a clearly subpar fighter. Doesn't have any base accuracy or damage buffs. You might be able to get a little bit through the talent table. The class is really meant to operate in conjunction with a mount. You can charge with your mount and do double damage several times a day. Hop on and off the mount as a free action. You and the mount get an armor class buff. This is one of 3 mounted classes we're going to see in ShadowDark. Coming up later this year, we'll get a paladin and then a mounted archer class as well. This one is really the melee oriented one. And again, it leaves me a little cold, especially because my campaigns are either 50-50 or a little bit more dungeon focused. On the other hand, the Pit Fighter, I think this would be right at home in any of my campaigns. Let's look at his abilities first. It's meant to be a frontline fighter, like a tank type character. If you start with the last ability, Relentless. 3 times per day when this guy gets knocked to 0 hit points, you basically get a saving throw. It's a DC 18 Constitution check to see if, instead of going to 0 and dropping, you stick at 1 hit point instead. DC 18 seems high. However, this is a Constitution-based class. Let's say you've got a +3 in your Constitution. Okay, now the check's a 15. Because of Implacable, they get advantage on all their con checks. Mathematically, people say that's like adding a +4 to your roll. So now you're making a single roll and you're trying to roll 11 or higher, right? That's like a 50-50 chance. With a luck token, you can improve that even higher. So Relentless should fire a fair amount of the time, keeping you from getting knocked out of a fight. And if the guy hits an opponent when they're at 1 hit point using their Flourish ability, they can self-heal. It's an interesting way to be able to soak a lot of damage and stay standing. Even their ability Last Stand, when they do get knocked down to 0 hit points and the death timer is going. Normal characters, if they roll a 20, they spontaneously go back to 1 hit point and they can get back up and get into the fight. For the Pit Fighter, that's an 18 through 20. So obviously your brain probably goes to the gladiator type figure. I actually see this as the stand-in for the ShadowDark Barbarian. Modern design for the Barbarian, like WotC design, has made the Barbarian someone who can soak a lot of damage through that rage ability that lets them shrug off damage. This is a different way of achieving maybe the same thing between Flourish and Relentless, but without any of the frou-frou stuff that gets added to the Barbarian, like totems and ancestors and spirit magic and all sorts of things that you see in 5e. It's a lot more grounded. And I think the other reason I make a connection to the Barbarian is I always think back to that classic Arnold Schwarzenegger the cinematic interpretation of Conan from the 1980s, where he's the slave who gets sold and has to become a pit fighter. And then he climbs through the ranks of pit fighting until he's legendary, and then he's finally set free. And then that launches him on his campaign. So if you want to play a Conan the Barbarian type character, the pit fighter's for you. Looking at the talents, they don't really get any accuracy buffs. They can improve their melee damage. They can obviously improve their stats, soak an entire attack if they roll Snake Eyes once per day. They can improve their self, heal, the flourish if they roll 10 to 11. Mainly accuracy for this guy is going to come from buffing strength and being a melee fighter, which again makes this guy maybe less focused on accuracy and damage than the core rule fighter, and a lot more focused on just being able to tank. All right, the next class, Ras-Godai, is the ShadowDark Assassin. The class features stealth and then the ability to do double damage if someone's unaware. But it has this sorceress side with the smoke step ability, lets them teleport somewhere nearby within about 30 feet, 3 times per day. And then they get this Black Lotus ability. There's a table, Black Lotus talents, where they've eaten this mystical flower. They get some kind of magical, unique ability to them. It could be walking on water, or being able to cloud someone's mind, or paralyze them, or cast fear, some kind of a supernatural ability. And then as they go up in levels with their Ras-Godai talents, they could potentially get more Black Lotus abilities over time. This class mixes a couple different assassin influences. I think of the Old Man of the Mountain and Alamut during like the Islamic period of the Caliphate, and the assassins the way we think of them in the Middle East. But then it definitely has Asian qualities as well. The monastery where these guys come from is trained as, or it's described as being managed or controlled or guarded by Oni, demons from Japanese folklore. Some of the magical effects that they have, and the fact that they use razor chains and blowguns and shuriken, also call to mind like ninjas. So it seems to have a little bit of the Hand, or Ra's al Ghul, and the what is it, the League of Shadow or League of Assassins from DC. Kind of like dump everything in the pot, stir it up, and boom, you've got this mystical assassin class, the Ras-Godai. Anyway, I like them. Pit fighting is added as a new kind of downtime. If you think about how carousing works, the players spend the money and then they go carousing, and they could get experience that way. And they're poorer. With pit fighting, one or more players could choose to engage in pit fighting. It's dangerous, but if they succeed, they get money, and then they get experience from the money that they got. So it kind of flips carousing on its head to a degree. I guess it takes a certain kind of flavor and a certain type of city for there to be arenas and gladiators and pit fighting, but it definitely fits a sword and sorcery type vibe. There is a sample arena presented here, Thraxis, which actually is in the Hexcrawl, and it's outside one of the Oasis camps. But then there's some gameplay elements which I think every campaign could take advantage of. The first one is Enduring Wounds. I love it. I use this as a house rule in all my campaigns. I guess if it's official ShadowDark, maybe it's not a house rule anymore. But the idea is this. Characters go to 0 hit points a fair amount, and then they get healed by the cleric or priest, and there's no consequences. There's nothing lingering about that. And Enduring Wounds is a way of saying, all right, if there's a severe injury, there's a chance that there's a consequence. Make a con check before you get revived. If you fail the con check, roll on the table, there could be a consequence to this horrible injury. So if someone's like goes to 0 hit points because they've taken 3d6 damage from a fireball or a dragon bite or something horrendous, you could have them roll on the Enduring Wounds table and see what happens. There was another OSR game, Adventure Conqueror King X, that has a Mortal Wounds table. Enduring Wounds feels a lot like that for me. And I have noticed Kelsey for ShadowDark borrows ideas from other folks, other games, kind of mixes them all in. Even some of the things on this table that look awful and are permanent, like, oh no, you've lost a limb, or you've been horribly scarred or permanently injured in some way. There are higher level healing spells available, maybe back in town or in a city, such as Regenerate, that could help the players, get out from under the weight of having an enduring wound. But I do like the idea that there could be some consequences for getting smashed in combat. All right, and then poisons, we need them if we're going to have an assassin class. One of the talents the Ras-Godai can have is the ability to work safely with poisons. I like the table. I think this was necessary. The only thing I don't like is there's no prices. The first thing players are going to say if poisons are in the game is, ooh, how much do they cost? Where can we buy them? So I think that's a missed opportunity. If I've missed it somewhere, the cost of poisons, let me know. And then there's some rules for mounts. If we're going to have horses and camels and things like that in the game, we need these. How much gear can they carry? What do they consume? How do they work in combat? And we also need to show that ordinary mounts are a level below, like these classes that are built around the mount, like the Desert Rider. So I think this is good. It applies to every campaign. And then we're off to the Djurum. So I mentioned how much I love the movie Lawrence of Arabia. I think you just cue the soundtrack, get yourself into that vibe of sprawling sand dunes, a hot sun baking in a clear sky, the ever-present fear of sandstorms, and then coming out of nowhere and discovering a wonderful oasis. You start to get a flavor for what this particular hexcrawl is like. We won't go through everything here. There's some rules for travel, some guidance on dealing with the heat and the wind. There are several oases with camps and opportunities for role-playing and social activities and being able to buy stuff. There's an actual full city, like a garden city with water and aqueduct in the hexcrawl. And then there's plenty of forsaken wastes filled with bandits and other kind of legendary monsters. Overall, I found this to be really evocative and a cool hexcrawl. I'm looking forward to seeing it actually expanded in the Western Reaches campaign setting a little later this year. After the hexcrawl, we do get some desert-themed monsters, including this thing, the Scourge, which is a lightning-based legendary dragon that can show up on the Wandering Monster Encounters tables. And then the last thing in the book is an adventure. The first thing that jumped out at me, it's for 4th through 6th level. So we tend to get flooded with low-level adventures to kick off your campaign, but then there's fewer mid-tier and even fewer high-level adventures. So I love to see something that's mid-tier like this. It's for 4th through 6th level adventures. And the picture there, it depicts a Durgar fortress deep in a cavern. There's a place in the hexcrawl called, I think it's called the Howling Caves. There's rumors that can drive the players to a location deep in the caves where there's this abandoned Durgar fortress, the Iron Fortress, filled with gold and gems and treasure. And the actual situation, we'll skip back and go take a look at the map. There's an upper level and a lower level, and 2 Ifrit, 2 brothers, twins, have been exiled here from the city of Brass by their father, a lord. He needs to name one to be his heir, which means that one of them needs to die. And by law, they're not allowed to kill each other. He's given them mission or a commandment to work together, but they're both secretly trying to knock off the other one. So if the players enter the scene, there's an opportunity for them to get recruited by one or both brothers to go and assassinate and kill the other brother. Now, granted, the players can explore this place. They can go full murder hobo and just lay waste to everything. But for a mid-level adventure, there is an opportunity for role-playing and intrigue. The top level is ruled by one of the brothers, and he has a bunch of salamander henchmen. So it's all fire-themed and oppressively hot, with a river of magma flowing through the fortress. And then the lower level is a Durgar mine, where we've got the other Efreet brother with a number of Durgar slaves working with him. And there's some spies and some other neutral folks as well. So it's a short, interesting dungeon crawl with an opportunity for some faction play. I think it's a nice way of rounding out this particular Cursed Scroll zine. I enjoyed this one quite a bit. I think some of the classes and the gameplay elements would work in every campaign. I especially would like to see the Pit Fighter in action at some point. I don't have any playtest experience with that one yet. So if someone in your game has played a Pit Fighter and you want to drop a comment, that would be awesome. Hey, if you've made it this far in the video, why not consider subscribing? Thanks. I'll do a review of Cursed Scroll number 1 in a couple weeks. I did a review of Cursed Scroll number 3, the Viking and Norse themed one, a few weeks ago. I'll link that here at the end. And otherwise, see you guys next time.